Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Thank you for having me, Samuel. I'm excited to be here with you and your audience.
Most certainly. So every entrepreneur has an interesting story of how they overcame obstacles to become an entrepreneur. Can you share with our audience a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start with a starting point. So I had wanted to be an entrepreneur for quite some time, or what I thought was an entrepreneur for quite some time. I had been working in my 20s with several entrepreneurs, helping them to build their businesses. And at the time was actually exploring doing a leverage buyout of a company I was working with at the time with some of my colleagues and partners. And that deal ultimately was not successful. And I found myself the next day without a job. So I needed to literally pivot. The training wheels were off, so to speak. And so I immediately went into starting my first business, which spawned several businesses in a short amount of time with different partners. And that led me into following kind of one foot in front of the next on building businesses that were interesting with people that I was interested in working with and creating products and services that make a difference in the world. So that's the short version. But yeah, my entrepreneurial start came from literally what many would consider a challenge of, okay, now what? And I was able to channel that into productive creation. And along the way, as you know, as being an entrepreneur, it's every day is wrought with new challenges of all different elements, from cash flow management to legal to partners to employees to acquiring new clients to servicing those clients to building new products to competitors in market to market dynamics. All of those are things that I've faced and face any entrepreneur in their business journey and growth journey.
Most certainly. So obviously you've had multiple companies, mostly in the education and learning and all those different things. And some of them are SaaS and some of them are, product and service related companies. How did the idea for LifeGuides come about?
Yeah, so the idea for LifeGuides came through an entrepreneurship group actually called Abundance 360, which is now part of Singularity University. It was Peter Diamandis' entrepreneurship group. And I had been part of that group about, I think it was 9 years ago is now when I first joined it. And I met Mark Donahue, who was my business partner and founder in this business. And he had shared this idea. We'd met Will Bunker, who was also the founder of Match.com at that event. And they were talking about their shared life experience of having parents who were diagnosed with dementia and then becoming caregivers for those parents, and the uncertainty that came with finding their way through the healthcare system and the considerations for their parents' care and just balancing the demands of that care. And I had also seen my own family, my grandparents, go through that process, and my dad and his wife going through that process. And so essentially they were talking about this idea that if we had struggle finding this path, imagine people who are not well-resourced or dealing with. And so the idea that you could build a technology platform that would allow you to match someone who'd been through a life experience, a life event, or life challenge, and was now on the other side and has some resources and perspective to be able to be a mentor or a guide to someone who's going through that same or a similar experience now and is in a state of confusion, upset, and stress. You could help them move through that more effectively, better resourced, and ultimately get to a better outcome, whatever that is. And so what I saw at that time, which is why I became one of the first investors, was that dementia caregiving was only one of thousands of unique life experiences, life events, and life challenges. And it just felt the appropriate timing because of what had happened with the sharing economy and the idea of using the software for dating, using software for accessing homes or cars, and now the opportunity to actually build communities using this technology and reconnecting people specifically for life support and guidance seemed to be well-timed and well-suited for where the market was going. And to your point, or comment, Samuel, that my business background has generally been in this intersection of education, healthcare, technology, and where those different pieces come together. And this felt very much aligned with that purpose and time.
Most certainly. So
that's why I chose to be involved.
So you kind of have like a two-sided marketplace from what I was able to gather. So you're funded by employers. It's a benefit to the employees and you're no cost to the employees. But then you have this other side of the ecosystem where you have to find these guides, essentially, right? Life guides who are coaches essentially working with them. So how are you able to build both at the same time, you need to really.
Yeah, so it's actually it's a great question. It's actually a three-sided marketplace for that exact reason. It's the payers, the employers and organizations that are paying for the service. It's the members, as we refer to them, which is the employees and their families that use the service, the technology and the access to the guides, and then the guides community, to your point, which is also made up of people of all different backgrounds, educations, careers, stories. And so that has been part of very much different parts of the stool, and getting them all to fit in and align at the same time, and matching the supply and demand and the proof of market. It all took a lot of time. So we've been building this business now. I was one of the first investors 5 years ago, and I've been in the CEO role now for just over 2 years. And we had commercialized it about 2 years ago. So we spent almost 3 plus years building out the technology, testing the hypothesis that people would have a good experience talking to a guide, testing out the model for recruiting guides, and establishing a service expectation and how we do that. And then the legal and compliance and training considerations that go into doing all of those different pieces. And then building out the understanding this is a totally new concept, right? The idea of peer support and mentorship on a true credentialed level, that, we have this tagline, more casual than therapy, more qualified than a friend. We're de-stigmatizing access to mental health services by making it safe to talk to someone who quote unquote gets it because they've been in that situation, and then being able to triage them effectively to other professional services or clinical care services or other resources that might help them on their path, or just to help direct them to whatever it is in their life that they want to pursue from a growth and development standpoint. And so all of those different pieces have taken a lot of time, energy, and resources to test, validate, and now distribute. But over the last few years, I would say one of the bright elements of the pandemic and all the change and adaptation that's happened over the last couple of years is that people are yearning for a connection. The uncertainty or unexpected challenges that come along in life are very obvious to all. And the opportunity to share in our wisdom, our resources, and connection during this really unique time in human history is very, very present.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's why telehealth became a big thing, right? Telepsychiatry, telehealth, all of those became very prominent in the post-COVID world for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously, is there some sort of incentive built to these life coaches on the other side? Are they incentivized to become coach?
It's a great question. So yes, the simple answer is they are compensated in actual monetary value for their time, experience, and value that they create to a member. But that's only one of 12 other ways that they're compensated. One of which is just the value of quote unquote paying it forward, the mutual healing and service that takes place of being able to teach one or provide support to someone who's going through that and giving meaning and purpose. The part of being in a community and the education that we provide, as well as all different elements that come along with being part of that community and tribe and that service and development. Those are all additional ways that people are quote unquote compensated. And so just by being a good human being and living life well and learning lessons and sharing that, you're obtaining an income as well as all these other benefits that come along with being a guide. And that also those skills translate into other employment opportunities. So if you're learning how to be a more effective listener, if you're learning to be an effective communicator, a facilitator of conversations, in different models for doing that, all those translate into being a better manager, a better parent, a better supervisor, whatever it is, all those different things apply. And so it's really helping lift up a lot of different elements, and that benefits companies, it benefits the communities, it benefits families. And I think that's the thing to mention is that we are a public benefit corporation. Our mission is to help 1 billion people live happier, healthier, more productive lives, or conversely, to reduce the unnecessary struggle and suffering that comes with not being connected and not knowing where to turn and not having access to resources. So by bringing those different things together and connecting people, we're using technology to reassemble what has existed since tribal days, seeking out your elders, getting the point of view of someone who's walked the road ahead of you. And now we have the opportunity to connect billions of people around the world as part of this global tribe, even though we're no longer living in that village, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I could even personally attest to how important this is because I have, my wife chose to stay at home because we have 4 kids. All 4 of them has some sort of allergies. And then we decided to just homeschool them because when we send them to school, they have to sit separate from everybody else. The kids that eat, peanut butter, jelly sandwich cannot sit next to my kids. So then we were like, hey, we're in a homeschool and we can care for our kids. And I even suggested to my wife, like, you're having to research and learn about all the allergies and how to combat that. you should just create a blog or start a YouTube channel just talking
Yeah.
about it, because if you're struggling with this, there's thousands of other moms have similar problems. They're looking for answers.
That's exactly it, Samuel. And there's so many components. There's because in that story you just shared, and thank you for sharing it, and congratulations on the work that you're doing as parents. You talked about considerations for homeschooling your children. You've talked about the social elements that go into how do you create a whole different element of their perspective. You've talked about the medical research or that goes into protecting them. You talked about the work that you go in preparing their diet. Those are all questions and considerations and concerns that other parents have that you would have the benefit of sharing, or that someone would have the benefit of learning from by talking to a guide.
Yeah.
Right?
Most importantly, you've kind of shared the big mission for the company, but what's your personal why? What motivates you?
Well, that's partly why I'm involved in this company, is because the mission of the company very much resonates with my personal why. My personal why has been to help people live happier, healthier, most fulfilled lives in their life and their business. Right. So if you look at kind of the theme across the businesses that I've started or been involved in or invested in, it's about helping people to be more educated, helping them to be more physically fit, helping them to be more emotionally and spiritually fit, helping them to develop resource and networks that can be shared and building better communities, right? And so my personal mission and purpose is being manifested in this business and businesses that I serve and lead and support.
Yeah, I mean, if you're passionate about what you do, right, you never work in a day in your life. So I think that's really true. So let's talk a little bit about company culture, because obviously you built this company, LifeGuides, with the focus of helping organizations to have thriving employees, right? So what's your perspective about company culture?
I'm a culture fanatic. I've been living and breathing and practicing company culture for as long as I've been in business. I believe that people are the core element of life and business. I believe that's why business exists, is to serve people. And in all of the companies that I've led as CEO, core values and the mission and vision and purpose of that has been the thread, the weaving, if you will, of what that company is built upon. And so with LifeGuides specifically, and you can see my hat, love, that's one of our core values. So we have an acronym, CLEAR, which is the core values of LifeGuides, which stands for C is community over oneself, L is leading with love, E is elevating humanity, A is accountability to excellence through trust, and R is resilience as we grow. And those different concepts, those elements of those values have behaviors that make up that acronym. And it's all about clearing a path and clearing a way, again, for people to be happier, healthier, more productive at life, in their home life and in their work life, and where those different pieces blur. And as you can see with my hat, I'm very fond of the love, because I believe that, and love is a very wide term, but the idea that we're providing support, we're providing resources, we're providing challenge, we're providing the ability for people and for businesses, specifically for companies, to spread that more effectively to create a better world. And to your point, beyond my personal mission is to help my children inherit, and their children inherit, a happier, healthier, more just world where people have opportunities to pursue their dreams, where they can develop education, where they can live healthily, and they have access to the different resources that can help them and support others. That's what I believe. I fundamentally, that's why we're all here on this planet, is to truly master and collaborate to develop solutions to make a better future, for helping humanity to thrive, to help humanity reach its potential. And I believe that we're really in a unique time of human history where technologically we're making quantum jumps in our capability and potential. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously, when you as an entrepreneur, right, like oftentimes you do the mission, vision, and values as part of the exercise of starting a company or having a corporation started, right? But then you kind of outsource the whole function of company culture building to maybe a people person or maybe an HR department. But how can entrepreneurs take a proactive investment in building that company culture, and what should entrepreneurs be doing about that? Because it's usually an afterthought.
Yeah, and I think that's changing. Well, I think there's some shift happening with that. But yes, I think you're right. Historically, it's absolutely been an afterthought, and I think part of that is also the shift that's happening of why does business exist, right? Whereas before, business was about production and making. At least it's going through iterations. Let's be real about capitalism. But for the last 100 years, it's been about maximization, product creation, and innovation, which are all wonderful things. I support those things. I am a capitalist in that sense. I also believe that why do we create these things? To add more value to people's lives, to make them happy, to give them more time, more opportunity to do things with people that they care about and causes that they care about. And so I think to answer your question, the leadership and the individual people that make up a company, who I can also consider leaders in some form, have a responsibility to live those values. The values are not meant to be, and the purpose and mission is not meant to be an aspirational, this is what we want to be. It's or what we want to do. It's about how do we want to show up and be present and apply ourselves in each conversation with our team members, in each conversation with our customers, in each conversation with our prospective customers, and to evaluate daily and throughout the day, how is one doing against that standard? And there's a lot of people that talk right now, I shouldn't say a lot of people, in the context of conscious capitalism, the idea that the vibrational or purpose of the leadership sets the standard of the potential of that company. It has never been more important than now for CEOs, for board of directors, for advisors, for executive teams to be applying themselves to live at a very, very high standard of excellence, of trust, of empathy, of accountability, and bringing the balance and harmony of traditional business metrics and structures with humanistic and aspirational and inspirational skills so that business and humanity can reach its potential. I believe that wholeheartedly.
So tell me a little bit about how you can practically do that, right? Because it is a big concept. You want to empathize with your employees when they're not performing well, or you want to empathize with your sales rep when he's not meeting the quota. But how do you still keep him accountable for the performance that he's supposed to have at the same time, like you said, showing that he's a human and part of this company culture or company as a family?
So two things. One, I think that's why we use acronyms. I think it's great if possible to use an acronym because it helps to anchor in someone's mind and spirit the ethos of that. It's easy to recall it. It's easier to check it, right? So that throughout the day, someone, a leader or a contributor, can look at their actions in that day, their actions in an individual meeting, in a conversation, in a work project, and ask, are they achieving or pursuing the highest standard in those different areas in those interactions? It really comes down to this micro focus on and presence in the moment, in the daily, right, in the minutia, and then being able to also allow you some space to look outward and to take a look at the bigger picture, and then on a quarterly basis or week, whatever the frequency is, to look backward at what happened, right? Did we hit certain metrics? Did we hit certain KPIs? If yes or no, what do we do to continue to hit that or exceed that, or what do we need to adjust? But it really is about the balance of the day-to-day, the minute in the spirit of the larger picture, and bringing those different things together. And it's not easy, right? It's even harder to do it in practice. But aspirationally, if companies are doing that, and then at the same time, you have to be able to connect with someone as a human being and as a collaborator, right? And in each conversation, we're all wearing those multiple hats and multiple roles. And I think it's important to carve those different things out. And I'll give another example. Publicly traded companies have become incredibly focused over the last decades on short-term outcomes, right, at the expense of long-term human benefit, in my opinion. And so it's the balance of how do we create long-term human benefit and short-term interactions, right? And almost flipping that. And I think that's the goal we need to get to, is let's look at the success we can create, not just in a quarter, but over a decade when we think about big missions. But how do we do that in the daily, in the weekly, in the monthly, by being great team members, great friends, great colleagues, great leaders, great parents, and great teachers. And what's really important, it's not just getting metrics. Like, why are we doing this? What matters? And what's the example we're setting for the next generations in this way? I think it's important to ask that, and not before you're dying, but while you're actually applying.
Yeah, and I think Simon Sinek talks a lot about what you just described. I don't know how much you follow Simon Sinek, and I think
I know his work, but I would not say I'm a follower. But I mean, I know it, but I'm not a.
Like he talks about the why, right? Like why for the company. Yes. And he talks a lot about like how companies like how Apple is different from Microsoft. And one of the things he actually mentioned too is essentially the whole concept of putting the investor before the employees. So like when you say the public traded companies are more focused on the investors, and they're making short-term decisions because they want to show profit and they want to show growth, and they do that at the expense of laying off 40,000 employees over a weekend just so they can show their top line revenue improvement or bottom line, whatever they have done. But what happens is that because of the actions, right? There's no trust in the organizational leadership, or they won't even they won't even, they don't love the company anymore, right? Because they're like, hey,
Yeah.
I have no attachment because I'm just an employee count. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you raise a lot of interesting points. Because I think, so first off, the role of business and being a trusted entity is something that it's a really unique time in that way. And I think that one of the standards by which I think companies and leaders should consider, investors are important, right? Financial success and stability is important. Survival of a business is critical, right? So and it goes through different layers and up leveling of maturity in a business where you have different considerations, right? So obviously startups versus major, Fortune 100 companies have very different considerations in that way, but there's still an element there, which is broaden the spectrum of stakeholders beyond just investors. When you think about your competitors' children, right? Your competitors' investors, right? When you think about the layers of that and the ecosystem, and you think about the multi factors of how decisions apply and the interdependence of decisions, it changes that, right? And I think that that's something that we need to teach and practice, is helping employees and leaders and teams to think of that way, and also not to vilify each other in trying this, right? What has gotten us here should not be necessarily criticized as bad. It allowed us to get here. There's lots of things that are good about what's been accomplished. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't change, and we can bring forward new models and better ways. It builds upon it. And yes, there's parts of it that need to be broken down or washed away or reframed, whatever it is. To your point, if it's been thought of as an afterthought, you need to go remodel or rehab the values and culture of the company. That happens, but there's also things that were good, right? There was something in that allowed it to get to where it was. And so we need to continue to find that balance of what is working and what has worked and why, and what is no longer serving, because things change so fast. And it's going to get faster and faster with technology and just where we're moving as what I believe is a species.
So
right?
we talked a lot about, how the company culture is important and all those things. And what about an established company that's been around probably a decade or more? They understand that their culture is not where it's supposed to be. What do they need to do? What practical steps should they take to kind of rebuild that culture in that organization?
Well, I think it depends. I don't think it's a unilateral answer, right? I think it would depend on what's healthy about it or what's not healthy about it, right? I think how well the business is doing against certain metrics, of traditional metrics, as well as what aspirational metrics could be. Those all need to be considered, and I think it also needs to be looked at. What's the purpose? What does the company want to be remembered for? What does it want to adapt for, right? And I think that we are at a point where a lot of companies and their entire economic system is looking inward at this, and will be, because if anything, another one of the blessings is the last 2 years has showed us that when motivated, when there's the will to make change, when there's a necessity to make change, companies can make very fast change, right? We talked about digital transformation for a decade, right? We went as a society overnight, remote, virtual, in a matter of weeks, right? So when it mattered, it happened. When there's enough will, when there's enough commitment, when there's enough brain power and heart power and resources applied, miracles can happen, right? And so how do we sustain that ethos in our business culture, in our leadership, in our teams throughout, in a non-crisis, right? How do we bring that ability to adapt always into it? And I think that's where we are right now. So I didn't answer your question exactly, but it gave you something to chew on.
Certainly. So obviously you make a big claim, right? The thriving employees make thriving companies. So how do you, as an organization, invest into building thriving employees?
So from a LifeGuides perspective, we recommend that people use our service first off. Leverage the guide community. Find guides for you to support your personal growth or your outlet, if you will, on whatever challenge, practically or emotionally, one you may be facing. So we believe in that. We invest in educational and training resources in that regard. And we, from a simple basis, we have an unlimited PTO policy. And we also recommend complete flexibility in our work. We're a remote team, and we use technology to allow people to work at their most optimum flow and to communicate against the standard of what we want to accomplish. And we're by no means perfect by this, right? I think that's the other thing, is just acknowledge that it's a work in progress, and we all falter, and things that come with the best of intentions often have a shadow to them, and they have to be considered too. And so, again, being very aware of what's intended as well as what's happening as an unintended consequence is important. And being able to listen, to respond, to adapt, and to acknowledge that, we don't have the answers. I think those are all ways that it starts. And then empowering people on the team to figure out other answers and better ways to try things, to do things or do things differently or better. That's a culture of learning and growth. That's a culture of empowerment, a culture of autonomy. And again, I think it comes back when you align around the mission, purpose, and values, you have a greater ability to give people the latitude to make good decisions. And the team also gets better, I believe, at self-correcting bad decisions, or, less than optimal decisions. I don't even like to use the word good and bad, because it's all learning, it's all information. So it's just decisions that can be improved.
Yeah, and I think you also talk a lot about on your website the importance of having thriving employees, or good employees, right? Their productivity is actually there's a direct correlation between how good they are and their productivity.
Absolutely.
So especially with the distributed workforce, and you talked about you being a remote workforce, and you also mentioned how within a week we all went remote, right, and figured out how to operate. Yeah. What are some practical advice you have for entrepreneurs in terms of measuring productivity, or even making sure there's better productivity, especially when you're?
Well, I'll answer a question that you kind of were alluding to before that question, which is when you create maybe this is a goal, an objective, because we hear right now a lot about the great resignation, the great recalibration, the great reset, the great, whatever you want to call it. And the question that I think, at least I ask, and I think other leaders can and should ask, is how do you create an environment where people choose to invest their time, right? Everyone has a choice of where they want to work. Everyone has a choice of how they want to pursue. Yes, they need to make a living, and that's a consideration. But ultimately, people are choosing where they want to go to apply their skills and talents to receive that compensation in whatever form it is. And so, creating an environment, whether it be live or virtual, where people say, "Yeah, I want to be here," and they choose to put their time and energy there, is an opportunity. So that's just acknowledging that is there always. I believe, I'm not going to say forces, but it requires companies and leaders to be more intentional about doing that, right? Because your behaviors will be different when you think of it in that context. And when you're able to calibrate in such a way that many people on your team choose to spend the majority of their time there and provide continuity, you have that compound effect, and things get better, things get more improved. You have intelligent knowledge that goes along, and more and more people want to work together to join that mission, that purpose, that movement. And so I think that's the standard. I think aspirationally, more CEOs, more leaders, more teams need to be thinking that way, because there's that statement: what you appreciate appreciates. If you appreciate a culture, if you appreciate that people are sovereign, if you appreciate they have a choice, if you appreciate that they have options and alternatives, and invite them into that, they're more likely to co-create and to stay. And that starts to echo and ripple, right? And so, and in doing that, I believe you create more productive employees, to your question, because people start to ask, well, how do I make it better? How do I leave my mark on this? Where's my unique ability or my unique opportunity to grow, to thrive, to contribute, to receive through creating in this way? And it starts to spur innovation. It spurs debate. And then and this is where it gets hard. That's where in traditional business we compete, right? And so understanding the natural ability to, or I should say, balancing our intentions and abilities to communicate, to compete, and to collaborate is a really, really at times challenging thing. And that's where it goes back to values, it goes back to culture, it goes back to communication, it goes back to forgiveness, right? It goes back to love. Right? These are the soft things that come into play. It's like, how do you create an environment around performance that allows for our higher selves to exist?
Yeah, we've tried to do that at One IMS. One of the things we've done is we have an innovation team that just meets once a week, just talk about different challenges that we're running into and finding creative ways to do it, and give them the freedom to work on that a little bit of their time into those innovation projects.
Yeah.
Some become fine project that actually becomes an app for our internal use cases or things like that. But it's really hard though. Not everybody actually wants to do it, right? Like you give the opportunity, right, but not everybody participates. So I'm not sure if that's
Yeah, no, I think that's an element of human condition, right? I think there's two parts to that. One is either there's many levels why I guess they would. One is they don't feel skilled, or they don't feel empowered, or they're not engaged for whatever reason. I believe that's a key part of well, again, growth is a key part of why we're here. So I think people should grow. I shouldn't say should, but that's a big part. And I think that understanding as a leader what your people value, right, is important as well. So if they're for whatever reason not valuing that, what is it that they do value? And try to go out and recognize that we're not all the same, and it's not a one size fits all approach, and that creating options is also part of that.
So many of what you described really goes back to leadership, right? Because the company leadership has a lot to do with the company culture and how you empower your employees to become better, right? And encourage innovation. All of those things really goes back to that. So how do you really distinguish between, in your perspective, a manager versus a leader? Does one play both roles at every given time? Or what's the big difference?
So I think you can play both roles, but I do think they're more distinct than the same, right? Or they have to be, they're nuanced, they're stacked upon each other. When I think of a manager, I think of tasks, I think of deadlines, I think of specific behaviors and standards and goals that are being managed, right? They require management of data, of insight, of people. When I think of leadership, and managing can be a part of that leadership, it's about creating a vision. It's about seeing ahead as well as seeing inward of the team members, of the people, of the individuals, of the values of those people and the value of the combined team, and helping to inspire and lead the force, lead the whole group. And then you can manage the different elements. It goes back to that we talked about before, the micro presence and the macro vision, and how do you bring those things together? And they can coexist and they can be in the same, but it's I think somewhat separate, right? They are one, but they're not, and it's happening concurrently. I know that seems kind of a out there concept, but they are.
Yeah, and I think it's at the end of the day, leadership is influence, right? Influencing people to take action or even live up to the vision of the company. But oftentimes, I think managers, like you said, is really focused on performance and metrics, and really not very caring, concerned about whether this person grows or improves. They just want to know, hey, did you hit the numbers?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you're building this company. You've had a lot of experience with doing advisory roles at multiple other companies, invested in companies, all of those things. What are you doing as Derek in personal development? What kind of things do you do to kind of grow and excel as a leader?
So I've been I believe I've been on a personal growth journey for the last decade, both in terms of what I do in my day to day in work and also how I apply to learn. So, I mean, I've hired dozens of coaches for me personally over the last decade on different areas of my life: how to be a better salesperson, how to be a better communicator, on how to be a better listener, on how to be more spiritually committed, on how to be a better husband, how to be a better father. Right? So all these different areas, I'm somewhat fanatical about finding the edge and finding new ways to apply information in my life. So that's first off. I also am part of different groups that I both free that I appear in, or I support, or I lead, or that I've paid again to be a part of in terms of you call them mastermind or peer groups or entrepreneurship groups, whatever it is. But getting around other people who are more skilled or have mastered other areas of life that maybe I want to pursue, or that have different business points of view on different things. And it doesn't have to be a business. It's all life. Right? I mean, again, it's being a parent, being a husband, being a teacher, working on certain skills in those different areas. Those are all, being more connected with purpose. Those are all things that require intention, work, perspective, and practice. And I think even you look at the best, I mean, it's kind of good timing. And this weekend, Tiger Woods is going to be playing in the Masters. And, a year ago, he was literally in a hospital and it wasn't even sure if he was going to be alive. But he's also worked with coaches all of his life. And he's a really fascinating example of someone who's gone through really a lot of ups and downs in all dimensions of his personal and professional life. And yet he continues to rise to the highest level over and over again. It's not an accident. It's because he has the intention, he has the will, he has the skill, he develops new skills and continues to practice. And he's undeterred by the resistance and challenges that come along. And he expects it. And he finds a way to persevere and apply. And he's willing to receive, again, the duality of being loved and at times, I use this extreme word, but he's hated by some people and criticized. And so, but he persists, right? And so I think it's a fascinating example when you look at people who are truly at the top of their profession, their game, their life, everyone has something to teach everyone. But it's finding people who have mastered or are really skillful in a certain area and bringing that intelligence information into one's own life. So those are things that I do is I watch examples. I seek to be around those people. I journal. I look at my own history. I look at my own goals. I look at my own areas where I fall short and where I want to grow. And I practice.
Yeah, I mean, growth.
So, and it's an ongoing.
Yeah,
I mean,
the growth-minded, people make the best teammates, right? Because if they're chasing excellence, you don't have to tell them, "Hey, I'm expecting excellence from you." They're already pursuing that, right? And they have that growth mindset, and they're always investing in themselves to improve. And then obviously, decision-making framework. I'm sure as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of critical decisions to make, right? And you can't prolong those things. Is there anything that you follow as like best practice in terms of making decisions?
Yes, there is. And that's a really interesting question, and it changes over time. So what I would say is one of the biggest things that I've noticed about, I don't make big decisions, like like leverage decisions, things that can change an outcome significantly, unless I'm in a really balanced or kind of high energy place, right? I ensure, because I believe that part of how you show up is dictates the outcome, right? And so I make it a point to save my energy for those big decisions so that it can be applied effectively. And then I try, and this has been a practice, to optimize and systematize things that would be kind of routine decisions, right? And or bring other talented people around that can make those decisions. And then one of my key factors for success over my life has been trusting my gut and being able to continue to refine that, to use that as a compass and as an indicator for where they fall on that continuum of really, really high importance or more of a routine or optimizable decision. And I also work to get feedback all the time. I also evaluate the effect or consequence of decisions I make so that I can be better in the future at making decisions. So those are a few things that I do. And I've also gotten very, very, very disciplined on how I use my time and where I allocate time for making decisions, again, for being in that.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about, how you invest into coaches and, mastermind groups and all of those things, right? You can have a lot of knowledge, but it all comes down to whether or not you can execute on it. What are practical steps that you're taking to really build the behavior, right? To execute the habits?
Well, again, one of them, I mean, there's many things, but one of them is that calendar piece. I mean, so my days are chunked down into micro segments. I actually had this example. I learned this. So Ed Milet, actually, I'll give him credit, is one who I learned this from, this micro targeting of time. And it was not how I normally I would apply myself, but over the last several years, I have worked to optimize my day into micro chunks and to set windows and to do tasks or pursuits within different things and to be more present in those. And so that's one example of where I've been more focused, more intentional, more intense even around how I apply my time, and it's working. And then I'd say it's also, and my business partner Mark is a good example of this, allowing space for the serendipity, right? There's also, and that was how I did a lot of the success, was just allowing the magic to happen, allowing the relationships to form, allowing things just to come into existence. And that was something I spent a good portion of my first part of my career honing and mastering that. And now I'm kind of going the other way. I've gone the other way, I should say, I'm being really disciplined, really focused, really, really efficient in doing different things as I have to be, because I have, similar to you, I have 3 young children, plus building companies, plus being a husband, like just trying to have some sort of non-professional pursuits, right? Takes up a lot of time and energy. And I'm now in the process of really bringing and bridging those things together. And it goes back to, again, what do I value? What do I prioritize? What do I want to put my time into? What am I going to intentionally say no to? What can I delegate? What can I automate? And constantly providing a space and an ability to evaluate that on a daily or even more frequent than that basis. And then also looking backward on a quarterly, a monthly, on a quarterly, on a different level, kind of looking at different.
Ed Milet is somebody that I admire as well. I would love to have that guy on my show one day. Are you in a mastermind or something with him?
I was part of one of the founding members of the Arte Syndicate that he and Andy lead, and so I had the chance.
Yeah, he's got an amazing story of overcoming obstacles. I mean, I heard his story, and I'm like, man, this is just incredible how he, who he is today. But very humble, right? Just the way he, positioning himself. no pride, shown through it all. So that's very encouraging to see somebody who actually came out of struggles and made it in life.
And he's still pursuing it every day. Right, that's something about him. It's pretty fat. I mean, his intensity and
definitely. I mean, there's a lot of Instagram, YouTube guys that shows off things just to show it off, but he actually has it, and then to show forth, right? So, any sort of productivity hacks that you have in terms of how you get stuff done?
I think that's one of the main ones I just shared. It's been working for me. Creating flow, really, that's another one. So, working within my flow windows, right? So, I've been doing a lot of work over the last year and a half at looking at flow states. And that's Stephen Kotler's work. They're getting into flow states, and how that you can get more done in less time, and then optimizing for team flow states in that same fashion, right? And so those are a couple of things that I've been working on, in addition to really being physically healthy, so that you have the best energy. So eating healthy, exercising, sleeping, spending time with loved ones, working on things that matter. Those are all examples of things that they're not necessarily hacks. They're the standard.
Well, certainly.
Right?
But Derek, I certainly enjoyed your conversation and learned a lot. And I hope our audience will learn from our conversation together. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Samuel.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.